Welcome to Whispers of the Taken, where every mystery is a voice lost in the shadows. Like, subscribe, and share to help bring these stories back into the light. And if something speaks to you, drop a comment. Even the quietest voice can echo the loudest truth. The following video is based on public information and intended for educational and informational purposes only. All media used falls under fair use. This content does not accuse or defame anyone, and viewers are encouraged to draw their own conclusions. Before we begin, I need to be honest with you. This is, without question, one of the most disturbing and heartbreaking stories I have ever come across. The murder of Gabriel Fernandez is not just tragic, it is evil in its purest form. This story was incredibly difficult to research and even harder to write. It's not just another true crime case. It's a haunting, gut-wrenching reminder of how cruel and unforgiving this world can be, especially to the most innocent among us. If you are sensitive to stories involving extreme child abuse, neglect, or suffering, please, for your own well-being, feel free to turn back now. What you're about to hear is the absolute worst of humanity. Thank you. This is a story of unimaginable pain. A young boy whose short life was filled with terror, neglect, and cries for help that went unanswered. This is the story of Gabriel Fernandez, an 8-year-old child failed by everyone meant to protect him. Gabriel Fernandez was born on February 20th, 2005 in California, but from the very beginning, his life was marked by instability and neglect. His mother, Pearl Fernandez, showed little interest in raising him and gave him up to relatives shortly after birth. For the first several years of his life, Gabriel lived with loving grandparents and an uncle who provided him with the care and stability every child deserves. But that fragile sense of safety was shattered when, at just 7 years old, he was suddenly taken back by Pearl and her boyfriend, Isauro Aguirre, a decision that would ultimately seal his fate. The moment Gabriel entered their home, the abuse began. Swift, cruel, and calculated. Pearl and Aguirre didn't just neglect Gabriel, they tortured him. These two adults, so hollow and vicious, seemed to take pride in dominating a defenseless child. Their actions weren't fueled by addiction or mental illness alone. They were driven by a dark, almost unimaginable evil. Gabriel was punished simply for existing, and their cowardice showed in every bruise, every burn, and every moment they forced a small boy to suffer in silence. They weren't parents. They were monsters, hiding behind the title, too weak and broken to be anything more than predators in their own home. Pearl Fernandez never wanted Gabriel. From the start of her pregnancy, she made it painfully clear to her family and anyone around her. She had no intention of keeping the baby, let alone raising him. To her, Gabriel was nothing more than a burden, an inconvenience she couldn't wait to get rid of. It was her uncle who convinced her to go through with the pregnancy, assuring her that he and his parents would take full responsibility for the child. And just 3 days after Gabriel was born, Pearl kept her word. With no hesitation, she called her uncle and coldly said, "Come get your baby. He's already driving me crazy." She abandoned her newborn son at the hospital without a second thought, walking away from the one person who needed her most. Gabriel never had a chance to feel a mother's love. From the very beginning, he was discarded by the one person meant to protect him. For the next 7 years, Gabriel was raised by his grandparents. During that time, he experienced a sense of love and stability that, though imperfect, was far better than what awaited him. But everything changed when Pearl suddenly demanded to have Gabriel back. Her reasoning wasn't maternal guilt or a change of heart. It was greed. Pearl didn't reclaim her son out of love. According to testimony and statements from the case, she did it so she could collect government benefits, food stamps, welfare checks, and other forms of financial assistance. Gabriel, in her eyes, was not a child. He was a paycheck, a way to milk the system for money she had no intention of using for his well-being. This decision, driven purely by financial motive, ripped Gabriel away from the only home he had ever known. It placed him directly in the hands of someone who had never wanted him, never loved him, and would ultimately treat him with unspeakable cruelty. That moment, the moment she took him back, sealed Gabriel's fate. And all for money. Not for love, not for family, for money. What Gabriel Fernandez endured inside his own home is nothing short of horrifying. Over the course of 8 brutal months, he was subjected to relentless abuse that defies understanding. He was starved, beaten with fists and household objects, forced to eat cat litter and spoiled food, locked inside a small cabinet with a sock stuffed in his mouth to silence his cries, and regularly shot with a BB gun by the people who were supposed to protect him. His tiny body bore the scars of unimaginable cruelty, cracked ribs, missing teeth, and burns that told the story he couldn't. This wasn't discipline. It was calculated, daily torture inflicted on a child who had no way to escape. What makes this tragedy even more unbearable is how many chances there were to save Gabriel. His teacher, noticing bruises and injuries, made multiple reports to Child Protective Services. Concerned family members and even neighbors called in suspicions, begging someone to intervene. But despite the mounting evidence and desperate pleas, the system failed him again and again, each ignored warning becoming another nail in the coffin of an innocent life. On the night of May 22, 2013, Gabriel's short life came to a violent and heartbreaking end. After months of sustained torture, Isauro Aguirre delivered a final brutal beating that left Gabriel unconscious and barely clinging to life. According to reports, he was slammed against walls, struck repeatedly, and left gasping for air while Pearl Fernandez stood by and did nothing to stop it. Instead of immediately calling for help, they waited, covering up injuries and trying to hide the truth. By the time paramedics were finally called, Gabriel was unresponsive, his body covered in bruises, burns, and open wounds. When first responders arrived, what they saw shook them to their core. Gabriel was barely breathing, his skull fractured, ribs broken, and skin riddled with injuries that no child should ever suffer. He was rushed to the hospital, placed on life support, but the damage was too severe. 2 days later, on May 24, 2013, Gabriel Fernandez was pronounced dead. At just 8 years old, his life was stolen by the very people who should have protected it, ending not with love or comfort, but with pain, terror, and silence. After Gabriel's death, the investigation quickly turned toward his mother, Pearl Fernandez, and her boyfriend, Isauro Aguirre. What authorities uncovered inside their Palmdale home was a scene of absolute horror. Evidence of prolonged, deliberate abuse that went far beyond neglect. The couple was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, with special circumstances of torture. During the investigation, neither showed true remorse. Aguirre claimed Gabriel was lying and misbehaving, while Pearl shifted blame to everyone but herself. Their excuses were as pathetic as they were heartless, revealing the depths of their cowardice when faced with the truth of what they had done. During Isauro Aguirre's trial, jurors were shown graphic photos of Gabriel's injuries and heard testimony that exposed the full extent of his brutality. Witnesses described how Aguirre tortured Gabriel because he believed the boy was gay, a belief that he used as justification for inhumane abuse. But the jury saw through his lies. In 2018, Aguirre was convicted and sentenced to death, now sitting on death row in San Quentin State Prison, where reports suggest he has faced brutal retaliation from fellow inmates. Word spreads fast behind bars, and even among the most hardened criminals, child killers are seen as the lowest of the low. There is no sympathy for him where he is, only the slow burn of karma and the daily reminder of the evil he committed. Pearl Fernandez, knowing the evidence against her was overwhelming, chose to plead guilty in exchange for life in prison without the possibility of parole. She now resides in a California women's facility where she reportedly lives in isolation for her own safety. Like Aguirre, she's been targeted by other inmates, spit on, threatened, and attacked. No one forgets what she did to her own son. Meanwhile, 4 Los Angeles County social workers were criminally charged for their failure to act on repeated reports and warning signs. Although those charges were later dismissed, the public backlash was fierce. Many believed the system had as much blood on its hands as the murderers themselves. Gabriel's death wasn't just the result of 2 monsters. It was the result of silence, failure, and a broken child welfare system that ignored a boy begging for help. The moment Isauro Aguirre and Pearl Fernandez entered the prison system, their reputations had already arrived before them. Word of what they did to Gabriel spread like wildfire through the inmate population and correctional staff. Everyone knew. They weren't just any criminals. They were the worst kind. Child killers. In prison culture, there's no lower rank. Before their feet even touched the ground, inmates were already plotting their revenge. Pearl reportedly faced immediate consequences. Stories have surfaced of her being jumped, slashed across the face, and even scalded with boiling water. She's been targeted so often that she's now kept in near-permanent isolation, not for punishment, but for her own protection. But karma doesn't need a crowd to deliver justice. Her isolation is its own form of torment. Isauro Aguirre hasn't fared much better. Though now housed on death row in San Quentin, even that didn't shield him from retribution. Rumors swirl about an early incident where Aguirre was cornered by several inmates, beaten so badly that he screamed for help. But in a chilling twist of irony, guards allegedly ignored his cries, turning their backs just like he once turned his back on Gabriel. The same coward who showed no mercy to a defenseless child now found himself at the mercy of those even more ruthless. It's almost poetic. The pain he once inflicted now returns to him in silence and shadows, a daily reminder that no monster escapes forever, especially not the kind that hurts a child. Gabriel Fernandez's death didn't just leave a hole in the lives of those who loved him. It ignited a wave of nationwide outrage. As the details of his abuse came to light, so did the repeated failures of Los Angeles County's Department of Children and Family Services, DCFS. Despite multiple calls, filed reports, and visible signs of trauma, Gabriel was left in the hands of his abusers. Social workers visited his home, saw the bruises, and still did nothing. Teachers and relatives begged for intervention, but the system, built to protect children, turned a blind eye. The public was horrified. How could a child be tortured for months with so many warnings ignored? The anger wasn't just at Pearl and Aguirre, it was at every official who failed to act. This outrage led to the creation of the 2020 Netflix docuseries The Trials of Gabriel Fernandez. The series, deeply emotional and painfully thorough, explored the failures of the child welfare system and gave a voice to those who tried to save Gabriel. It brought national attention to the cracks in CPS, highlighting how bureaucratic apathy and negligence can be just as deadly as the abuse itself. Viewers around the world were moved to tears. many learning Gabriel's story for the first time and demanding justice, not just for him, but for every child like him. In the years since his death, Gabriel Fernandez has become more than just a tragic headline. He has become a symbol. His name now represents the urgent need for child abuse awareness, prevention, and system reform. His story is taught in classrooms, referenced in training materials, and honored in advocacy work aimed at protecting vulnerable children. Gabriel's life, though short and marked by pain, sparked a movement. And while nothing can undo the horror he endured, his memory now stands as a powerful reminder. We must never be silent when a child is in danger. Gabriel's story is not just about a life lost. It's about a world that completely failed a child in every possible way. It's a story so dark, so deeply heartbreaking, that even in our worst nightmares, we couldn't dream up something so cruel. This wasn't a case of neglect that slipped through the cracks. This was 8 months of daily torture, emotional, physical, and psychological, inflicted on an 8-year-old boy by the very people who should have loved him the most. And the horror is only deepened by the fact that so many people knew. Teachers, family members, and neighbors all raised their voices, and yet no one, not one person in power, did what needed to be done. Gabriel was left completely alone in a world that ignored his screams. This is the worst thing that could happen to a child. There is no justice that can truly make up for what was done to him. Gabriel wasn't just a victim. He was a little boy who wanted to be loved, who wrote Valentine's Day cards to his mother and asked if he could be adopted by his teacher because he knew something was wrong. His story is a haunting reflection of just how blind, broken, and indifferent systems can become when no one is held accountable. We remember Gabriel not just for the way he died, but because of the light he carried even through the darkness. A light that was brutally, mercilessly extinguished. And now, that memory fuels a promise that we must do better, that we have to do better, because no child should ever suffer the way Gabriel did. Not ever again.